You are listening to the Foreign Policy Focus podcast.
We cannot wait for the final proof. The smoking gun could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
Haven't you driven enough people from their homes already? Bulldoze their villages, seize their property and their laws. They had no part in making it.
Now working in Libya with friends and allies, we've demonstrated what collective action can achieve in the 21st century.
Now the host of the show, Kyle Ansel.
This is episode 327 of the Foreign Policy Focus podcast. This episode is a little bit different than the typical show. It's an interview that I did on the Peace and Liberty podcast. The host there is my good friend Steven Clyde. On the show, we discuss Somalia, Yemen, North Korea, but the main focus is on Russiagate with the Mueller report coming out. This interview is from over the weekend, so it's really fresh content. I'm guessing most of you won't have heard me discuss most of the topics in this show before. The Somalia stuff might be a little bit of review from the last show. But the main focus, like I said, is on Russiagate and the fact that we got the Mueller report to the Attorney General on Friday, which means the whole probe is done. There's no more indictments coming whatsoever here, so no chance that anybody in the Trump campaign is going to be indicted and, I guess charged with or prosecuted for rigging the 2016 election along with Russia. So this is big for all of us all along who have been saying that there's no actual evidence of this despite all the reporting, out of the mainstream media. So I was really excited when I did the show. I think the interview came out great. I hope all of you will like it. And, I'm sure I'll have more on this story as it develops through the week. And eventually I'll probably do a big wrap-up show on Russiagate when we get the full or whatever parts of the Mueller report are going to be disclosed to the public. So enjoy the show.
Well, how you doing, Kyle? Welcome to the show again.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on the show. Thanks for writing my content over at the LP Mises Caucus website. I know that's a big thing that you're involved in and helping to move along. And so I encourage any other writers out there to, throw you some stories because I'm pretty excited about the project you got going on over there. And happy to be a part of it.
Yes, we need writers right now. But for anyone listening, Kyle does a daily news roundup every day. I think you wake up like 5:30 every morning and you just compile like 25 news articles. And if you just wake up in the morning and you don't have much time, you have like 5 minutes, go just read through the links, click on a few links if you like, and you'll get a ton of information for that day. So I'm happy to be able to post it every day because I get to read all that.
I do give myself an advantage to start on it the night before, but
okay.
I'm up early every morning. Usually it's up on the Libertarian Institute site by 6:30 Eastern time. So that way everybody could just click on the link real quick and read through, see what the big stories are of the day, and whatever intrigues you, I always got the links on there to make sure if you want to read the full story or whatever. And, these aren't links to like fringe websites either. I mean, if you go through and read through, you'll be like, oh, he's just talking about, fringe cases of police abuse and everything like that. But pretty much everything I link to is from, pretty mainstream or solid alternative media sources.
Well, I guess one thing I have to notice is out of all the stories you gather each day, I doubt hardly any of them make the mainstream. Like maybe like one or two of the popular cases that day make it, and the rest of them just kind of fade into the abyss. They never get heard about, but some of them are just like, man, these are all atrocious stories. Like, so I guess maybe we could start off with like Somalia. Like, what's going on in Somalia right now? They're getting bombarded by airstrikes.
Yeah, so quietly, very quietly, right at the beginning of the Trump administration, he declares, I believe, areas in Yemen and Somalia as areas of active hostilities. And this really loosened up what kind of authorities the U.S. would need, different military people to carry out airstrikes in Somalia. And so AFRICOM right now, which isn't, I believe still isn't based on the African continent. It's actually based out of Germany, is waging a pretty heavy air war in Somalia. In 2017, the first year of the Trump administration, I believe the reported number was in the 2 to 3 dozen airstrikes. Last year, the number of known and admitted strikes was closer to 50. And then this year we're already at, I believe, closing in on 30. And I use these kind of vague terms for words is because they really don't admit to strikes unless they're asked directly. So if they say, we got some documentation in this region, from, maybe say June 2nd to June 3rd, did you carry out an airstrike there? Then they'll say yes. but there's times where we still don't know for sure who carried out the airstrike, and the possibility is too, there's also a CIA drone war going on in that country. And so for those of you who know more about Yemen, how there's kind of a separate war against the Houthis and against Al-Qaeda and ISIS, I think there's a little bit of the same situation there, where the war, I guess, on both sides is maybe against Al-Shabaab, but the CIA is definitely carrying out their own drone war separate from the U.S. AFRICOM war. Now, the target of that war is majority Al-Shabaab. There is an ISIS affiliate in Somalia. I think it's most, it numbered about 200 people, and I'm not quite sure how, ISIS these guys are. If you look at different affiliates, ISIS affiliates around the world, none seem to be quite as extreme as, the original caliphate setting people on fire and, the extreme brutality they've been able to oppress on people. And even if you look at Afghanistan, they're just the Pakistani Taliban who are taking refuge in Afghanistan and, have branded themselves ISIS Khorasan group. But I think this is more, strategic. I've joked about, jihadist marketing, very darkly joked, but, these groups are looking for funding. And so calling yourself ISIS probably helps you to, get money from whoever the hell is sick enough to give money to a terrorist organization. So you have had airstrikes against ISIS in Somalia as well.
I imagine just going by history, just the patterns in history, if it's not the U.S. sending out the airstrikes, it's probably someone else that we sold U.S. military weapons to. So probably no matter what, the remnants of these missiles on the ground, it probably says made in USA. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I know that there is a Somali national army, but one of the big problems here is that they really don't have any power to control any of the region. Probably the southern third of Somalia, if you look on a map, is controlled by Al-Shabaab, and they really don't have any possibility to take it. In 2016, in fact, some ambitious U.S. Special Operation Forces attempted to go in, seize a city, I believe Bariri is how you would pronounce it, Briire, and ended up, carrying out a very traditional counter-insurgency operation where they, go try to secure and, become popular, take away financial resources of Al-Shabaab, and completely failed. And in fact, that counter-insurgency operation may have sparked the Mogadishu terrorist bombing, and I believe that was in October 2016, which is the largest terrorist attack in the history of Africa. I believe the last count was over 600 people had died in that. So, these are kind of the operations the U.S. has tried to carry out in Somalia in the past, but we carry out these airstrikes, but there's no way for, like, if we, let's say, blow up an Al-Shabaab checkpoint, there's no Somali army oftentimes able to come in. I think a lot of the African Union forces that are in that country are losing interest in it. I think Burundi is now withdrawing all their forces from Somalia. And so if you can't secure, then you're never going to be able to really win an air war against an insurgency. We see the same thing in Yemen, where Saudi Arabia has carried out thousands of airstrikes in that country and has made almost no progress in 4 years. If you look at maps of the battle lines over 4 years in Yemen, it is unbelievable how little that war has changed. I mean, maybe you would even be able to compare to like World War I trench warfare levels of the battle lines just do not change. And it's because you have an air war, but you don't have any ground troops to go in and secure it. And when you're blowing up people, this is Stanley McChrystal's insurgent, Matt. This isn't, radical anti-war Kyle Anslow saying it. It's, U.S. General Commander of Afghan forces, Stanley McChrystal, that if you kill 2, you end up with 20. So what do you do?
And it sounds like we can't possibly know all the times these atrocities are happening. Maybe we know half of them. Maybe we know a quarter of them. But if we don't have that information, well, there's a large faction that's off there fighting that we don't even know about. I was going to ask you, related to Somalia, do they still have a government, or are they more or less kind of like Yemen, where you just kind of have like competing factions? You have like Houthis, I think they still own they control like 80% of Yemen last time I heard you say. Is it kind of like that, or do they have some type of official government? Or I know Somalia and Libya, those are two of the countries that now like still have slavery, like literal slavery.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of like sex trafficking and that kind of slavery going on in Somalia. I'm not sure like about Libyan open slavery, but you may have read those reports.
Yeah.
Just to credit all of that kind of stuff I said about the war, a lot of that reporting was done by Amanda Sperber in The Nation. So check out her work. She's pretty good on the Somalia stuff.
How do you spell the last name?
Sperber.
Got it. I'll put that in the show notes.
But as far as the governments in Somalia go, I think there's like 4 regional governments and there's 4 regional presidents. And I think varying region, like the region controlled by Al-Shabaab, I don't think the central government has a whole lot of influence there at all. There is still the capital city of Mogadishu that's not currently controlled by Al-Shabaab. So there's a government there and I think an official president there. And then there's Somaliland and I think Puntland are the 2 other governments. I don't know very much about those. I do know that there is quite a bit of violence recently in Mogadishu, mostly Al-Shabaab terror attacks, coming because during the Somali regional elections for the Al-Shabaab region, this guy who was a former member of Al-Shabaab but had claimed to gone through the de-terrorism process, whatever they name that as, giving up your guns and your allegiances and, being without contact for these people for so many years. And he was running and would have likely won the president for the Al-Shabaab region. And they arrested him just before the election and took his name off the ballot. And so, I don't think that the central government is in any way representative of the, kind of territory held by Al-Shabaab. And I don't really even know if there's like any kind of pretext that they could even reclaim that land anytime soon.
Oh man, what a mess. What a mess. I don't want to go too completely off topic. I know when Somalia's government collapsed, I mean, that's why you have the joke, why don't you guys just move to Somalia? They don't have a government there. I'll link to it because I don't want to go too off track here, but Tom Woods had a guy on, and basically what the guy was arguing is that, you have to look at Somalia before and after the government collapsed. When were they better off? Were they better off when the government was still hanging on by a thread, or were they better off when it actually collapsed? And it turns out to be the latter. I'll link to that. I can't remember the Tom Woods episode name, but it's interesting. Now I know there's stuff going on in Venezuela. There's a lot of obfuscation there because there was that case the other week, a few weeks ago, I think now, where you had that, what was like a food truck, they're trying to bring supplies in and it caught on fire. And the way the media captured it, I mean, this would have been a point I agree with, like, yeah, of course the socialists are burning all the food. But I think what happened, maybe you could touch on that. It wasn't what the media said.
Yeah, this was the big day towards the end of February, the 20th or the 23rd maybe, where you had, it was the big concert that was held by the Virgin Airlines guy, Richard Brunson, I think is his name, right across the border of a bridge in Colombia, with the border in Venezuela. And they, were supposed to have, Juan Guaido, the guy who proclaimed himself, with the backing of the United States to be president of Venezuela, no actual constitutional authority, for Venezuelan constitutional authority for it whatsoever. And, they were going to go over, there's going to be a whole bunch of army defections and they were going to bring a bunch of much needed food aid into the country. This story is perfect to talk about for, kind of the problems with the reporting going on in Venezuela for several reasons. One is there's a portrayal that Venezuela is not allowing any aid into the country and that the Maduro government is starving his own people. This is untrue. And in fact, international aid is coming into the country, specifically from Russia and China. And I believe India is, important to that. And there's Cuban doctors in the country, this kind of thing. So, there's that. If you looked at reporting from, journalists on the ground, the Gray Zone Project people, Matt Blumenthal and Ben Norton, I think Dan Cohn as well, were on the ground for a few weeks in Venezuela. And there certainly weren't, no food on the shelves. Now, I'm not saying that I want to go live in Venezuela and that, humanitarian conditions there are perfect and that, it's like, just like being in Miami. But I am saying that, it's not the portrayal of 10 miles away, people are staying in a bread line. You know what I mean? It's not quite that bad right now. Now, there's definitely been times where there's long bread lines, huge food shortages, but I think oil prices have rebounded a little bit. The Venezuelan currency has stabilized a little bit. You know, we're not looking at the same inflation. I heard one Venezuelan say, you know, we're at the point now where if you go to the grocery store at the beginning of the week, you could expect the price is going to be relatively the same at the end of the week. So, you know, the state of the Venezuelan economy isn't as bad as they say, and there's aid getting into that country. The other point here is the bridge they keep showing. There's this bridge and you see some barricades on the Venezuelan side, and they make it really, the portrayal is that they shut down this bridge so that aid couldn't get into Venezuela. Well, it turns out that this bridge was constructed years ago. I think it officially opened in like 2014. I could be off by a year or so there. But anyways, it's been, you know, constructed for years, but it's never ever been opened. And so the barricade wasn't put there to prevent aid from getting into the country. It was because Venezuela has a closed border here with Colombia. And then the other issue is that on the day that they tried to bring the aid over, one of the aid trucks got set on fire. Now, within a day of this occurring, if you, you know, have been on Immersion News or reading my daily news roundup, you would have had links to the video showing an errant throw. I don't think it was intentional from the Venezuelan opposition. I think they were actually throwing a Molotov cocktail at the Venezuelan border security and hit one of these aid trucks, and it caught on fire and it burned up. So I'm not saying it was like an intentional false flag situation, but that's the way it happened. Now, weeks later, the New York Times reports on this like it's news. You know what I mean? And I think they used a lot of the same video content, which was at least originally made public to me by Matt Blumenthal. And so, you know, give him credit for that, doing great work down there. And I know, you know, it's a commie talking about a communist country, but, you know, he has video evidence. And if you look at his track record, he's an honest reporter and does, you know, good, important work. And, you know, that's the story of the aid truck firing up in Venezuela.
I bought the official story too. I mean, I've been covering Venezuela for about 1.5 years, 2 years now. And yeah, I think it may have gotten better just because they've had so much worldly pressure on them. It's like everybody knows you don't have food in your shelves. You better change that, or I don't know. Maybe our government was actually threatening them to an extent where it's like, look, it's not like we sit here and we want you to starve. It just so we can say it's from socialism. Like, we would like you to actually feed your people. Maybe it has progressively gotten better. Why? I don't know.
Yeah, I think oil prices is one thing.
Yeah, oil prices are the highest they've been this year right now. I heard Peter Schiff talk about it. I forget if they're like $60 a barrel, $80 a barrel.
I think they're closing in on 70, and that was like a kind of a bigger benchmark. But the other thing, and this is a trend I've seen now in both Iran and Russia, where U.S. sanctions will like have pretty big impact on an economy when they are in place, but eventually it stabilizes, and you know, new business markets are opened up, and you figure out how to do business with U.S. sanctions. And so that doesn't mean that, you know, people like in Iraq can't starve to death, but I guess there's enough wealth coming into Venezuela right now to at least, you know, not have that level of humanitarian disaster on their hands.
Probably just a lot of factors at once. I know people were fleeing for many years in a row. People are just fleeing.
Oh, and I'm sure they still are. It's not a great economy. Like I said, I don't want to go live in, you know, be a Venezuelan. I think there's, you know, as well, U.S. sanctions still hurt that economy. And, you know, looking at the track record of, you know, what imperialism has done to different countries, especially with huge amounts of natural resources, I mean, that's an issue too. But certainly the loans that the Chavez and Maduro governments took out, and their massive, you know, price controls and minimum wage and all these policies were absolutely destructive to that economy as well. So it's not just one thing. It's a bunch of things. And, yeah, I guess that's always like kind of the stance I've learned to take as I read world news is that, you know, from a libertarian position, it's really easy to blame the commie government. And that was my initial reaction first too. But there's a lot of other things going on at the same time.
There's plenty of tragedies happening there. There's no need at all to mischaracterize them and like make up a story, because you don't need to do that. That's one reason I'm so scared that if we invade there, it's really just giving the communists ammunition, because look, if their economy gets worse from that moment, they're just going to say, okay, well, obviously it's not socialism that's doing it. It's intervention, it's sanctions, it's whatever. Personally, I think it is socialism. It's just the sanctions are kind of like the nail in the coffin. But if things are getting better, don't freaking invade the country, because I mean, they might use that as a political means to, hey, look at this. It's obviously hasn't been socialism. So Venezuela, I pray for those people every day. I do hope it's getting better. Maybe we could just touch on really quick. I want to touch on North Korea, and I'm curious if you know what's going on in Yemen, because obviously we did an episode last year, and they're saying like 10 million people could possibly be at least at that starving point, maybe not dead, but starving. So maybe we could just touch on those two countries real quick, and then we'll jump in the Russiagate.
Yeah, I'll do this North Korea one fast. So we had the Hanoi summit, and it didn't go well. And, afterwards you had North Korea saying that they may take back, some of their steps that they've taken towards denuclearization. There's been reports that they're reconstructing some missile facilities. The problem with that is that sometimes improvements on a facility means adding an air conditioning unit or repairing a door, not, reconstructing the launch pad. But there has been some evidence that North Korea is taking steps towards, I believe, constructing a launch pad possibly for like a space rocket test. And a space rocket is inherently different from an ICBM missile kind of thing. So don't believe any of that. I'll go into that some other time on your show if you want. But the kind of big step was that it seemed John Bolton had really gotten a hand in the North Korean policy. And this is a reporting from Daniel Davis. He's a former lieutenant colonel, I believe, and he wrote this at the National Interest, that, Bolton had really gotten a hold of the policy and was demanding the complete surrender of the North Korean people up front, for them to really destroy even their civilian nuclear program or really limit the capabilities, give up all their nuclear weapons and their missiles.
The North Korean people?
Well, the North Korean government.
Oh, sorry. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. I mean, so the North Korean government, I guess, in some ways represents the people as well, in that, if they end up going to war, the people are going to die too. But yeah, that was kind of a slip of tongue on my part. And then also destroy their chemical and biological weapons. So this is even steps beyond, I think, what denuclearization kind of looked like in the eyes of the North Koreans going into this. And it looked like, things were going bad. Now, the good thing is that we have Moon Jae-in, the president of South Korea, who's really ideologically committed to making this Korean peace process work, and he really wants it to happen. And so he's even talking about setting up new summits with Kim Jong-un as we speak. But today we had Donald Trump say that we're halting putting new sanctions on North Korea, and that's not the same thing as walking back sanctions. I know that, but hey, I'm excited that Donald Trump seems to be making at least this right step on North Korea.
And just to wrap up the point, it's troubling when you see people and you're like, this is basically what they say. How could Trump possibly work with that evil dictator? It's just, I don't even know what do you say to that. A lot of these people are these people who live in North Korea, they're political prisoners. I forget how many people live there. Is it like 20, 30 million people? It's in the millions. So, the way Michael Mouse describes it, they're kind of like hostages. They're not completely idiots. They're not completely hypnotized. They're hostages. And just to say, oh, well, Trump should just blow him off the map because he shouldn't work with a dictator. It's just like, oh my God, this is the neocon mindset that we just can't get rid of. I mean,
Right. Well, that's the interesting thing, that, the same people who talk about doing it for liberating the North Korean people are also talking about liberating them from their lives.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're like, we're going to just send them all to heaven. That's, that maybe is John Bolton's policy or something crazy like that. But I guess the point I was going to make is that, normalizing relations with South Korea is the way to go to liberate the Korean people. I mean, just look at the steps already being taken, saying rail travel between the two countries, making roads between the two countries. How the hell do you think people are going to get to South Korea if there's not a road? You know what I mean? So they've destroyed several border kind of posts and positions, and, if you want to loosen up, this is literally loosening up tensionings on the borders. And so if you want people to cross, this is the way you would do it. I mean, I guess in a way, this is kind of what you would see with the fall of the Soviet Union when you had the Berlin Wall coming down and then people could cross over. But there was some normalizing of relations before that with like the INF treaty and all the other good things that Reagan was doing with Gorbachev right there in the late 80s, that unfortunately, thanks to John Bolton and 2 different administrations now, is destroying all that great work. And you mentioned Yemen, and I'll just say that way we could move on to Russiagate, that I'm lucky enough to have been on the Sherry Voluntary show for a second time, and Sherry's a good friend of mine, and I think Steven as well. And
oh yes,
yeah. So anyways, I don't know when this episode will drop, but within days of this episode dropping, it'll either have already been published or will then come out talking about Yemen in great detail. So I really go over pretty much everything that I think is important on Yemen in that episode. So definitely listen to that if you can.
So just a one-word answer. Is it getting better or is it getting worse?
Worse.
Okay. Whoa, wow. That's not good to hear. Well, that's depressing. Let's move. Yeah, I'm going to link to everything we've touched on so far. I've been writing all this stuff down. So Russiagate, if you guys are watching the news today, you know that the Mueller report has wrapped up, and from what I understand, it's done now. Like most likely nothing's going to come out of it. The left is having a meltdown right now. So I guess we're going to try to backtrack here, talk about where it started. Where did all this Russian... Has this been prevalent in prior elections? I mean, this Russia collusion thing's been around. It's kind of like a Cold War mentality, I would imagine, right? It has to come to that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I think a lot of it came from just the Hillary Clinton's, refusal to accept that she lost, combined with the fact that Trump's an oaf.
Oh,
and
definitely
said a whole bunch of stupid things, and a lot of people can't imagine how he became president. And it's a lot, I think, easier for some people to think that, oh, it was these Russian Facebook ads and Donald Trump teamed up with them to, make this happen in the collusion, versus, well, Hillary Clinton was kind of stupid. There were videos of her fainting. She didn't look particularly good against him in the debates. The fact that, her husband has a track record of abusing women, and that she didn't campaign in the states she needed to, like I think Pennsylvania, Michigan, and a few others, is the reason that she lost the election.
She was in bad health there for a while too. There was one instance where this is on video, and she looks like she's about to pass out.
Yeah, it's the 9/11 thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like at the 9/11 memorial. So it's like 2 months before the election. Not to mention that there's years and years of Clinton corruption. And I know that Donald Trump's corrupt too, but he hasn't been in the public eye, at least in the, politics quite as long. And so there were all of her speeches that she gave to these, like Goldman Sachs types organizations, and then we're not going to release the transcripts of those. I mean, that was something that really propelled Bernie Sanders. You have the Clinton Foundation taking millions of dollars from these, Saudi Gulf monarchies and then selling them tons of weapons. And, the Yemen policy started off during Hillary Clinton's time in Secretary of State. And so there's, I guess, a lot of questions at least to be raised there, isn't there? That, she was taking all this money, from the Saudis and then try to put a Saudi stop up in charge of Yemen that caused all the problems that we have now.
And we're just talking about Hillary's character. I mean,
right.
Think about the fact that many years ago, so this is what Tulsi Gabbard's on she's getting hit hard for, is because I think she had some different views about homosexuality than she does now in 2019. And she admits it. But you look at what Hillary Clinton was saying, she was saying things that are pretty much exactly the same or worse. I think Bob Murphy, one of the latest episodes of Contra Krugman, Bob Murphy played a trick. He's just look, I'm just going to read off these things Tulsi Gabbard said. And he read them off for a few minutes. He's like, those are all Hillary Clinton. Now you could pull that trick on people and get them to bash Tulsi, and they're bashing Hillary and they don't know it.
Well, yeah. And I mean, think of other policies too, like the Clinton crime bill that Hillary Clinton was all over.
Oh, yeah.
And how many poor people have ended up in jail for way too long because of that. And her immigration policy certainly wasn't always open borders. I mean, I'm sure you could probably play that game and say, oh, this is a horrendous thing that Donald Trump said last week, and it was Hillary Clinton's immigration policy in, 1999 as she was running for senator or whatever.
Well, the candidates we like, they actually changed deep down. Tulsi Gabbard, I mean, sure, she supposedly changed too, but she didn't because she's not my candidate. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to.
And then the other thing is the whole James Comey stuff. And I really think this played a large role in Hillary Clinton losing the election and how the FBI handled that investigation. Now, one thing that hasn't come to light at all is that James Comey was some kind of secret sock puppet of Donald Trump. And in fact, Comey has been very anti-Donald Trump since getting fired. Donald Trump fired James Comey pretty early into his presidency.
Right.
So it doesn't seem to me that there, is any kind of way that like Trump colluded with James Comey to screw Hillary Clinton here. And in fact, I think it was Hillary Clinton's corruption finally caught up to her. And then, when the FBI's only move was to say that she's guilty of all these things, but we don't recommend charges, so she could continue to try to become president. That was too much. Look how ridiculous that sounds. You're not going to charge her. You're the FBI. You put Martha Stewart in jail. You're not going to put Hillary Clinton in jail. And then, this is apparently the only person the FBI ever verbally interviewed off the record and all this other stuff. And so, I think that it was a large part of that. Now, honestly, I gotta say I was surprised that Hillary Clinton lost that election. Even on election night, I thought she was going to win. Yeah. I was like, wasn't 100% sure, but I would say, 75-25 or so that Hillary Clinton was going to win that election. So, I guess take with a grain of salt all my, U.S. politics analysis with that I didn't catch on to that. But yeah.
Yeah. So Hillary Clinton, the Clintons in general, pretty poor characters, pretty piss poor people. So I think you kind of want to start off with the dossier. Is that where you want to start?
Yeah. So
did I say that right? Is it dossier?
Dossier. This is the Trump dossier. This is the opposition research put together, Fusion GPS to former UK, former spy Christopher Steele. And this, comes with all kind of allegations, including the P tape. They tried to find parts of this that turn out to be true. A big one recently was, Michael Cohen allegedly being in Prague or not on a certain day. And it turns out that almost everything in this dossier is absolute garbage, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, we later find out through releases, I believe it's the FISA release, right, from the FISA warrant that the FBI applied for under Donald Trump, that this was likely a part of the reason they applied for that FISA warrant. And this was during the election, remember? So, while the Mueller investigation is going on, I guess, for about 20 months, that started in May of 2017. I mean, the FBI is investigating Donald Trump pretty early on. We have the pages the texts from Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, where they're, talking about their insurance policy in case Donald Trump becomes president. So the FBI is conspiring against Trump from pretty early on here. And Andrew McCabe was involved in all of this as well.
I think that's why there was some speculation that what if in the end it was Hillary Clinton that was using the Russians? And there was definitely that argument. But, the fact that they had, what was it, a Donald Trump advisor or something like that wiretapped. I don't know. It's just, how do you go on to say that Donald Trump's the Russian colluder? Honestly, I just got to mention for the viewers, by the way, I don't really know many of these details. I do not watch the news. Kyle's like more the news guy. So I'm kind of just giving out my thoughts here, where Kyle's going to give out the facts. So just if you're wondering why I'm not saying anything worthwhile, it's because I don't know anything. So.
Yeah, and I guess I should say I didn't watch any news on Russiagate, and maybe that's why I'm good on it, because I read all the stories and I read them all the way to completion. That means, when the Washington Post either the Post or the Times put out a 10,000 word review of, Russiagate that basically was painting Donald Trump into a corner. And then in, paragraph 155 of 198, it says there's no public, evidence at all that proves Donald Trump illegally colluded with Russia in any way. I made sure I read all of that. And so that's, I feel like that's always my leg up on other people, is I don't watch Rachel Maddow tell you every night that, oh my God, it's going to be so cold in Montana that if the Russians turn off our power, they could kill us all.
Hey, if you watch the news, you're misinformed. If you don't watch the news, you're uninformed. That old adage. So I think we got the Flynn indictment next. So by the way, I'm just off to the side, kind of pulling up some stuff so I can add some details if you need some more details. So what was that?
The only other thing I want to, I guess, go on real quick here is that then at the end of the Obama administration, he has them throw together that kind of intelligence thing that's initially reported as an assessment of all 17 U.S. intelligence agencies. It's not, it's handpicked analysts from 3 agencies. And then the NSA then, on like the most important conclusions of that report, which is, did Russia, I think it was the Clinton, the DNCC emails, were they responsible for that? The NSA was only somewhat sure, whereas the CIA was all the way sure. And kind of what we've heard from people like Bill Binney and former NSA, kind of directors and spy chiefs and everything, that the NSA would be the people that know that. So if they're only moderately confident, that's a real question mark from us. But you remember this, it took months before I think it was the New York Times had to issue a correction because they kept saying it was 17 intelligence agencies. Hillary Clinton was out there saying it. That's not the case at all. So that report was completely bunk. Then we get this Michael Flynn indictment, and everybody's like, aha, we knew it. Michael Flynn was having secret conversations with the Russians. Now, the conversation that Michael Flynn had with the Russians during the transition period, so this is after Trump is elected, but before he became president. So there's a little bit of a complicated kind of thing here, because in one sense, if the U.S. and Russia want to plan for our policy for more than 2 months away, then maybe Michael Flynn does have to talk to a Russian ambassador. And this call was, tapped by, different intelligence agencies and stuff. And you would figure Michael Flynn had to know that. He was a former DIA, or DNI. But here, Flynn has a conversation, says 2 things that are of importance. One is he says that, the Trump policy will maybe be a little bit lighter on Russia diplomatically than Obama. So don't overreact. Because remember, Obama was way overreacting to Trump being elected president and kicking Russians out of the country and doing all kinds of crazy diplomatic stuff. And the second thing was he lobbied the Russian ambassador to veto a UN Security Council resolution that was going to be critical of Israel, because the Obama administration that announced that they would not veto it. And because of when it was coming up, and because, Donald Trump is probably bought and paid for by Sheldon Adelson, not Vladimir Putin, we had Michael Flynn make this ask. And actually, I think there's some evidence that this didn't even come directly through Trump, but rather through Kushner, the son-in-law there. And so that's kind of the story behind Michael Flynn and Russiagate. Now, what he actually goes down for is apparently being an unregistered lobbyist of Turkey. When Michael Flynn was, I believe sometime in 2016, was given a few tens of thousands of dollars by the Turkish government to his security analysis firm or whatever the hell. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, what Turkey was doing was paying Michael Flynn, a retired general, to say, we agree this way with Turkish policy. And Turkish policy is good for the United States. It's kind of like a bribe payment. But anyways, that's what happens. And because Flynn didn't register as a foreign agent, then he ends up, that's kind of what he gets in trouble for. There's also some speculation here that Flynn's son would have been the guy to really go down for this, because I think he was much more heavily involved with the Flynn's group at the time than Michael Flynn was. And so there's even some, people out there saying that, well, the only reason Flynn took the deal that he did, I think he also admitted to lying to the FBI, is because, he thought his son could go down for not registering as a illegal foreign agent. But anyways, nothing that Flynn actually goes down for has anything at all to do with colluding with Russia. But
it all sounds so serious, like when it all first comes out, like, oh, this must lead to some crazy thing. And it's like, oh, it led to nothing. What? It's funny. I mean, I have a few points here to make. So one point I just can't help but notice. It's a little bit funny that people on the left would look at Trump and be like, he's colluding with communists, because essentially that's kind of like what they're implicitly saying is like, you're colluding with Russia, like you're in bed with the communists. It's kind of funny that the left's accusing the right of that. It's just one random funny point I wanted to make. Now I'm just thinking about like plausibility wise. I could think of a few different scenarios this could occur. Now let's imagine that in the first scenario, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton have nothing to do with Russia, but there are people in Russia that want to sabotage whoever, just for whatever reason. What's to stop them from doing that? Just that's one possibility, right? Is that they're in Russia, they're doing whatever they want to do to get the information over, and it shows up as like, oh, what's this IP from Russia coming from? I can imagine another case could be some guy in Zimbabwe and a VPN connected to the Russia server or Russian servers, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that doesn't even make sense. Maybe they can go way deeper than that and prove that wrong. But it just seems like the plausibility-wise, it's hard to say. Couldn't it be that Hillary Clinton hired somebody from Russia to sabotage Trump, and then it's like Hillary's just playing the game? Like, look, like these Russian people keep messing with Trump. Or it could be either way, or just, does that make sense? Sorry, I felt like that was a little clear.
I mean, there's actually a conspiracy theory. Remember that when WikiLeaks was about to drop the Clinton emails, Guccifer 2.0 dropped the email, at least some of the emails first. And there was some speculation that, maybe the DNCC or members of the Clinton camp were actually the Guccifer, or leaked the emails to Guccifer to leak out first. But anyways, like, let's remember too, I guess, just while I'm talking about those emails real quick, that they're all legit, right? So the problem here, what people are saying is that, a lot of the general conspiracy is that Donald Trump worked with the Russian government to get the emails stolen from the DNCC and I guess Podesta servers, and then funneled to WikiLeaks through a Russian cutout to then publish to the U.S. people. Now, one of the things is this is a real big problem maybe if the emails are fake, but they're all real, right? That's the first
people
thing
wouldn't be bad at WikiLeaks otherwise if they were fake. I mean, why would you care?
Right. But then it turns out, and this is a big conclusion. I mean, read about in the New York Times today, their article, the URL there is just, I think, /politics/Mueller -report, is, lays out that there's no public evidence of anything dealing with Donald Trump and WikiLeaks, Donald Trump and Russia, that WikiLeaks got the emails from Russia. I mean, Julian Assange has offered, and I think in exchange for immunity, or even, just kind of having the conversation on his own terms to let the, kind of U.S. government know, that the Russians didn't give WikiLeaks the emails, and he was going to give them some kind of proof on how that would be. And I think, he still wants to do that without giving away his source, because that's a big part of the ideology of WikiLeaks, is that you don't have to give up your sources, which is a really important journalistic, tent.
I got to ask, maybe we can just try to clarify this point for viewers and just for anyone in general. What does influence mean? I think when the average person hears influence, they think maybe the Russians were somehow getting like 1 million extra votes in for Donald Trump. Maybe it could be, I don't know. What is influence supposed to mean in context in this election?
Yeah, it's really hard to say what that meant at first. I think at first it was probably the emails, but then it's pretty clear that it can't be the emails. And so at the end, I think it's more along the lines of what I want to talk about next is the Internet Research Agency, and apparently Russia using our social media to conspire and influence and trick dumb Americans into voting for Donald Trump. Mm. Now, the important thing is that a lot of this money was spent through a group called the Internet Research Agency. And what they started out as is, I guess the guy who owned a school lunch company in Russia and made really bad school food.
That makes sense, by the way.
Right. And I guess is also, pretty connected to Vladimir Putin. So that's how he gets the contract in Russia to make, all these school lunches, and finds that it's easier, rather than making better lunches, to like do kind of this internet trolling kind of thing, manipulate the forums and everything. So people think the school lunches are really good. And I think this even included like personal attacks on like kids complaining about their food. Right. So this isn't like a great guy or
Joe's again, man.
But then he, realizes that, hey, there's a hell of a business here. I could, and starts the Internet Research Agency, which I think is something between like a troll farm and a ratings boosting or maybe ruining company that goes out and like posts different things to, generate different kind of reactions and probably incomes. You sell these accounts or something like that to somebody who's then marketing a product, and they now have 10,000 followers that they didn't have to earn. And so, there's all these kind of internet windows. I'm sure a lot of people don't understand. I don't completely understand how all of them work, but I've been running my own Facebook account long enough to understand how valuable like 10,000 lights would be. And so then the Internet Research Agency, sometime in I think 2015, starts having some people monkey around in the U.S. markets and start to do some English, memeing and different things. And so they were posting things from puppy dogs to, Hillary Clinton is Satan to the Pope endorses Donald Trump. And, this is used as kind of to say, oh, this was the malign Russian influence that destroyed our election. Well, if you actually look at the money spent on ad revenue and the posts, almost none of the ads were targeting the swing states. So even the most basic information that people should know about U.S. politics, that if you need to win elections, states like Florida, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio are all extremely important. Right. And California, not so much, that's going to go left. And so if you look at where the ad money was ran, very little of it was ran these important states. If you look at the dates, a lot of it was ran after the election even. And then also some of it was pro-Bernie. Some of it was just anti-Hillary, not necessarily pro-Trump, and not necessarily during the time, that it was clearly Trump was her opponent. And so, there's a lot of evidence there that this wasn't like necessarily targeted to make Donald Trump president, certainly not with any substantial amount of money. Gareth Porter does some really good articles at consortiumnews.com where he breaks down the percentages of what these posts by alleged Russians in the Internet Research Agency, and at times they claim members of the GRU actually had on the election. It is very minimal. It's like 0.000 something percent, right? So we're talking about almost nothing. But that was another big thing, that this was dead to rights. Russia influenced the election through our social media accounts. And I mean, they drag all these people up in front of Congress. We now have debates about controlling the social media companies because of this, and it turns out it's all nothing.
Yeah, and like that line you just said, like something influence election, that's the line that's used over and over. It's not as if that person did that specific thing to influence election that specific way. It's kind of all up in the air. Like if people don't have a certain idea about what this is, just whatever they hear in the next news podcast program is, probably makes sense to them in their reaction area. Like, yeah, that was what happened. I also wonder, obviously the Clintons are very, very rich, very, very rich. But I think relative to Trump, people, they think about Trump Towers and stuff like that. You don't think about Clinton Towers. I imagine there's some kind of idea that maybe Trump could just pay people off. Even like with what just happened yesterday, I think a lot of people are probably thinking, man, Trump really paid them off well. And on the other end of the spectrum, people think Trump is completely broke, and that's why he won't show his tax returns, right? So you have both things happening at once, always, right? But I wonder if that's one of the suspicions.
But I do think that point was a very important one in 2016 that we shouldn't leave off. That like you had a candidate Hillary Clinton who was like kind of known to have to peddle, power for money, and talked about how like when they left the White House, she was so poor, and then, got all these donations to the Clinton fund and everything. And on the other hand, you had Donald Trump saying, I have $1 billion. Nobody could buy me. I bought all these people, but nobody could buy me. I mean, that's a hell of a contrast. You know what I mean? For the voters to see. So I do think that's an important point. One thing I guess also I'll just take real quick here. When we talk about the left being all on board the Russiagate, we really mean like kind of Hillary Clinton, which is center left, out to Rachel Maddow. But once you get beyond that, you have people like Aaron Mate, who wrote mostly for The Nation, but has done the best work. And, I think he's some kind of socialist on Russiagate. I mean, he has been out there every day on Twitter, taking on every Russiagate conspiracy. Matt Blumenthal, Dan Cohen, Ray McGovern, former CIA analyst, used to brief the vice president, diehard leftist, is saying absolutely not on Russiagate.
It must just be with foreign policy. It's a little bit harder to warp that to fit your ideology. Like person A blows up person B. I think the communists and the anarcho-capitalists can agree on that. Yeah, that happened. Person A blew up person B.
And I mean, the best example is, of course, I've had Joanne Leon on my show at least 4 times now to talk about Russiagate, and me and Will Porter have been on her show 2 or 3 times, and she's as left wing as you get, but she's been, right on Russiagate all along, and we get along great because we just sit there and talk about all the lies that John Brennan and the rest of the FBI, are telling all the time.
Oh, it probably feels really good. Like, we disagreed so much, but I don't know. It just feels so good we can agree on this one issue. I got to ask, have you tried to get Noam Chomsky on? Because
I never have, but that's an interesting thought. I mean, I don't do too many guests. That's part of it. But that would be a cool guy to have on one day and talk to him. Well,
you got to do it quick because he is up there in age. Like, you might not have the chance in a few years. I think he's in his 90s now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I want to get him on. I really want to get Norman Finkelstein on. Foreign policy. I love those guys both in foreign policy. Economics, no, makes me pretty mad. I'll give him that. But yeah, so I mean, we've covered a lot of the points here. I think you want to talk about Maria. I don't know her last name here.
Maria Butina. So this is a woman that was a kind of an NRA style lobbyist, a pro guns girl. And then was smeared in the U.S. media as being, trading sets for power in the United States. Now, her real story is that, she's in Russia. I think she's from like the Siberia region, is obviously from a young age kind of a standout, very bright girl, and adopts very, kind of American 2A right to self-defense political views. This is really something that nobody has in Russia. There's not a drive to have a Second Amendment style law, and the gun outlook in Russia isn't that great. But she did find, sponsors among the Russian elites that, were happy to have some kind of Russian interested in gun rights, and, they believed in gun rights. And so she got some sponsorship from somebody who was fairly high up in the Russian government and came to the United States and, did some lobbying around. She ends up, dating, I don't know if she ever married the guy, but she lives now with this Republican political operative, or did before they threw her into jail in solitary confinement. And he helped to pay for her, grad school education. And so, that's them claiming that she traded sets for money. But this is, just a couple in love, and he's supporting her dreams and everything like that. And she lobbied for gun rights in the United States. And obviously, if you're a Russian gun activist, this is something that's good, because then maybe you could have the NRA come to Russia or something like that. And that may be a big kind of deal. So this is the story. Not that she's any kind of, Russian super spy hooker sleeping with American senators to get the nuclear codes. But, that was really the portrayal. And, it's so disgusting because you have a left-wing media who will run, on their show all about how terrible and, racist that Donald Trump is for his border policy. And then they will take Maria Butina, a very bright woman who's, come from Siberia to be, involved in U.S. politics and, really become a little bit of a player, and smeared her as, trading sets. And of course, the story about I don't even know if they issued a retraction, but that she's not doing that is never as big. And it's just so sexist, and it's so, anti-Russian. That's amazing that nobody, at MSNBC is like, we're writing these stories about Donald Trump and his immigration policy, and then we're talking about this. And man, it seems to be a real contrast here on our whole PC culture values.
Speaking of MSNBC, I figure we'll kind of close with finishing it out. What's happening with the left right now? They're having a meltdown. But did you want to touch on this Paul guy real quick before you get to
Paul Manafort. I guess we should talk about him because he's getting a lot of heat. So kind of the two big trials that happened, Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen both got in a little bit of trouble, things that had nothing at all to do with Russia. Paul Manafort's has a little bit more to do with Ukraine and some money laundering and lobbying that he was doing in Ukraine. Everything was kind of for the pro-Western side. In fact, he was apparently lobbying the Ukrainian government to take a EU kind of austerity deal rather than a pro-Russian deal, and to lean towards the West rather than Russia. So this is exactly counter to Russian policy. So it really doesn't make sense to me in any way. Paul Manafort's in there. And then, of course, I'll just say that I think Roger Stone's a liar. And so I don't think he had any, real contacts with WikiLeaks between WikiLeaks and Donald Trump or anything like that. And there isn't any public evidence of it at all right now. Basically, he's, just a big mouth. And I guess Robert Mueller bid on it. And this is probably, one of the best things that could happen to Roger Stone, assuming that he doesn't end up in prison for a long period of time for his lies, all the notoriety he's going to get off of this. I mean, if anybody has any questions about that, watch the Netflix show, Get Me Roger Stone, and you will have no doubt by the end of that this guy is a liar and will do anything for notoriety.
I'm so bad with names, especially while I'm in college. Like, I just can't remember names. Is Roger Stone the guy that got raided and arrested recently, or is that someone else?
Yeah. He's the one with the tattoo of Nixon on the middle of his back.
Right. Okay.
Nixon's on the middle of his back. Yeah, there you go. You know how he is. Can I say something real quick though, just about the general hysteria that this has created? And I think this is like the most destructive force here, is that everything Russia became bad. Russia became the source of all ills. And so now they're malign actors in the Middle East. I think this makes the Syria policy more difficult, especially looking at the landscape right now in Syria when it's clear that the Assad and Russia side has won the Syrian civil war. There needs to be some kind of reconciliation with the Syrian Kurds, which is currently where the U.S. is occupying Syria. And it seems to me that the Syrian Kurds are really looking to hold on to more autonomy and hoping that the U.S. stays in that region of Syria. And so that war can't be cleaned up until the U.S. leaves. And I think that's a real problem, especially for Donald Trump. If he looks to cut a deal with Assad, the Russiagate cloud hanging over his head, everybody is going to assume that he did this because, for a while they're talking about compromat, that Russia has compromising information on Donald Trump. The FBI investigation of that turned up absolutely nothing, of course. But at the same time, you still have the Syria policy all messed up for it. I think it's really hurt Russia relations with our U.S.-Russian relations in general. When you look at any time Trump is trying to repeal sanctions, he gets that. The sanctions are all unnecessary. A lot of them are because of Sergei Skripal poisoning. I don't know if that's a false flag, but there's a lot of questions there, and definitely expelling all those Russian diplomats was way too premature, and it can't be undone because of this Russia hysteria, and especially at a time building up all these nukes, getting out of the INF treaty. It's a very dangerous situation, and especially since I think it's 2021, the new START treaty would run out, and that's a really important nuclear arms control treaty between the United States and Russia. And if we don't have a sensible view of Russia in this country by that time, and don't have a president that could approach Russia sensibly because of the Russiagate hysteria, this is a very scary situation to me.
Yeah, it's like imagine like me and you are in this thing where there are a bunch of different sides making up stuff about us, so we're kind of stuck, and it's like the media is making out me and you to be enemies. Now me and you actually go and try to talk to each other, and the media sees that, and it's like, wow, they're colluding together. It's like, no, you created this false situation for us. We're trying to talk about it, so Trump can't even go talk to Putin. If he goes and talks to Putin, that's colluding with Putin. I mean, it's just totally speculative.
Right. They're demanding the transcripts from the talk. This is something that's never been demanded before. And, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin were alone together in Helsinki for an hour. What was said, what was done. This is the level of hysteria is absolutely crazy to me. It's disgusting. Point out that journalistic standards took a complete nosedive. I don't know if it's because journalists really believed that, this compromising information exists and that Donald Trump was either the puppet of Vladimir Putin, a Manchurian candidate, or in some way compromised as president and unfit to do the job, and seemed to be willing to print just about anything from any single anonymous source, no matter what kind of backing it has. So that's been a huge destruction in journalistic integrity. I mean, one great example is the, Vermont oil or electric company whole scandal that went on kind of right at the beginning of the Trump term, I think, when there was some fool got fished, right, from this electric company. And then there was some access by some malware into the system, and they blamed it on Russia instantly. And there's all this hysteria. Oh, now they're going after that. They went after our voting machines. Oh, it turns out that's fake too. And so there's been all this false fake news. I can't tell you in the past 2 years how many headlines I have read that they were really closing in on Trump and that some kind of, charges were coming and that he wasn't going to be president anymore. And what we get from Mueller today is that that's not happening. So, we had a complete disruption in, journalistic integrity and what it means, to publish news and have sources and all this kind of stuff. We've had such a destruction of, I think, America's views of Russians that, hopefully, all these people have so much egg on their face when there's no indictment whatsoever. Hell, I thought at the very least, like, Don Jr. or somebody would go down for something, at least have something here. And it turns out that they're not going to get even the littlest thing.
There was some rumor going around for a while, and I'm going to wrap up here after this point. There was some rumor going around that, like, there was going to be some deal made, and, like, Trump Jr. is going to go to jail along with his wife, I think, and, like, to like basically make it so Trump could stay president. It was a really, really weird theory. Did you ever hear about that one?
Yeah, no, it's the Trump Tower meeting, I think, is the center of this. And I probably should have brought this up because this is one of the big tenets of the Russiagate conspiracy. But it's such a ridiculous one. There's a Russian music promoter that wanted to get a meeting with somebody in the Trump campaign and made up something about having information on Hillary Clinton. I think it was Don Jr. being stupid enough, took the meeting. After like 5 minutes in the meeting, he realized he was just being lobbied. I think the woman wanted to repeal the Magnitsky Act, which is this thing that the United States usually uses pretty ham-handedly to attack anybody around the world that they don't like with our sanctions, which, is an economic blockade of you, is pretty powerful. I mean, the U.S. is a world reserve currency. And so the Magnitsky Act really prevents people from doing business, makes them a lot poorer. And so there's a reason why Russian elites will want it repealed. But again, this isn't any kind of collusion. It didn't go further than this. There was no handshake deal made. I think Don Jr. left the meeting early when he realized it was, just crap.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff is often so filled with nothingness that it just disappears. Like, whatever happens to that one case, like that seemed pretty serious. Don Jr. is going to go to jail. Disappeared.
Right. And this is the important thing is that right now, then, everybody, like, from Aaron Mate and all those guys who have been right on this the whole time, Scott Horn, that I guess they should all be given shows and columns at the, mainstream news sources since they were right the whole time. I mean, we can't, have Rachel Maddow hang around after she was so wrong about this. And yeah, I mean, like, that's never even a topic of discussion. That, there's going to be any kind of punishment for the people that were so wrong and told us all these lies. Yeah. I don't remember the Iraq war and the build up there, but I've talked to Scott Horton about it quite a few times, and he says it's, very similar.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for people that didn't know, my time is if it was yesterday, right? I'm just making sure it wasn't 2 days ago.
Yeah, no, it was, Friday the 22nd that the Mueller report was given to the AG. The AG will have, I'm guessing, some time before he decides what's made public. This is going to be a big part of the coming debate is how much of the Mueller report to make public. There's, I think, a pretty legitimate kind of like law enforcement theory that if you have information on somebody that you're not going to indict them for, you don't give up all that information just because they don't then have the court process to defend themselves and kind of be proven innocent. So it's just an allegation that somebody made. I hope, actually, I guess, that they make a lot of the report public just because the more of it that's kept behind, the more that it's going to be, kind of conspiratorial. Oh, what are they hiding? And no indictments are coming from it. So unless it reads something like Comey's statement on Hillary Clinton that, Donald Trump was actually guilty and we have the proof, but we're choosing not to do anything, then I hope, we could officially call the Russiagate conspiracy dead. And, maybe mock Rachel Maddow like we would Alex Jones.
Right. There was a few red flags to me. Like, this is occurring on like a Friday evening. Like, are they really, really announcing it on Friday evening? That may not be it, but that was just the first red flag. I was sitting there on my cell phone just watching it. I was just I was just scrolling through different news stations, like seeing, has anyone announced it? Has anyone announced the final news? Because it came out way late. It definitely came out like way late. It just dragged on and on and on. And it became more obvious that, like, shit, they know they have to report that it's not something they want to report with a straight face because they know it's just going to be a shit show after that. Because on the one hand, I think pretty much everyone on the left thought, or most people on the left thought he was going to get impeached, and everybody on Trump's side thought it was all bullshit. So the Trumpites right now, they're feeling great. They're just like, look, I knew this was the case. It's the case. And the left is just like, they're having an extreme meltdown right now. So I just wanted to read some titles to the articles of MSNBC, excuse me. Meltdown. MSNBC threw the biggest tantrum since Hillary's loss after Mueller. That was one of them. Chuck Todd panel goes off after Mueller report finally submitted. MSNBC's Joe Scarborough says Trump is either losing his mind or lying. I'm talking to you, Donald. Like this is all happening. A few hours ago.
I believe it. I'm not surprised.
There's one that says MSNBC's Chris Matthews is livid over Mueller's report. How could you let Trump get off the hook? So you have like 5 different theories here. Like some people are just saying, look, why did you let Trump get away with it? Some people were saying, I'm extremely mad about this. This can't be right. What did you do, Donald Trump, to do this? It's totally crazy. And the other little funny meme I have here, it says MSNPC, and I found that meme today. That's pretty funny. So.
Yeah, I give a shout out to Mance Raider, or Pete Raymond, I guess now, for the best meme I've seen on it. It's Robert Mueller serving up 2 burger buns with nothing on it. So that's my favorite thing. And just, I guess before we wrap up here, there's a couple more people that I think I should mention just so the audience hears their names. And maybe if you see their names then on Twitter or something, you'll think about clicking on their work, because these are, people of decent integrity, like Caitlin Johnstone. I mean, she even attended a Ron Paul conference, and she wrote her article today on the Mueller report as we should be like relentlessly mocking all these idiots who bit into this Russiagate thing. And I do think that's a good strategy going forward. Dan McAdams and Ron Paul at the Ron Paul Liberty Report have covered this thing. And, so much of what I know is because I watch their show Monday through Thursday every week and learn about all the, important things going on in the world and about like Russiagate and, all that kind of stuff. And then Peter Van Buren, he writes a lot of places. I believe he's a contributing editor now at the American Conservative, though. And shout out to the whole American conservative publication for doing great work on Russiagate as well. And maybe there's a Twitter thread that I'm in, and it mentions all the people who were right on Russiagate all along. So maybe I could link that to you, and you can link it in the show notes page. But
this is going to be a ridiculously long show notes page because I've been writing all this down, and I think all of it's worth putting in the show notes because it's all so important. It all connects. Is there anything else you wanted to add? Because I'll throw out some links at the end.
No, yeah, I'll just say check out all my work. Maybe one of the best places to go for what we talked about in this show is my website, immersionnews.com. Basically, what I do with all my news roundup is I categorize them at immersionnews.com. So if you go to Immersion News and click on the Russiagate link there, you will see every pretty much story that I've covered on Russiagate since 2017. So you could go back through and read all the lies and all the debunkings. There's been so much, we could do like a 6-hour show.
Oh, I'd have so many more things to go over. Like, we gotta end.
Right. But even then I would think, oh man, there's like these 5 or 10 things that I still left out.
Yeah,
I mean, it's so bad. There's like top 20, Russiagate lies articles out there because there's been that many big lies with this story. But I hope I captured, I hope the most prevalent ones today. And, I hope this is a little bit of a victory, especially for U.S.-Russia relations and the whole nuclear issue and all of that. I really don't give a care about, Donald Trump being a legitimate president or not. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he's a little bit better than Hillary Clinton. Maybe he's not. But
I guess
at the end of the day, though, I just want to make the point that the reason that I think this is good news is because it could improve U.S.-Russian relations. And, the whole delegitimacy of the U.S. elections, I don't think is a great thing for us all culturally.
Yeah, it's just really about where the conversation is going to go from here. Like the last point I'll add is I think the left right now, they're very, very conscious of the fact that they got to do something quick. If time goes on and it's just like, man, like Mueller lied, and days go on, they're going to start to do it to themselves where Trump is going to get elected 2020. And that has to be a big fear in their mind that, man, we really screwed up right now. That's probably half what people were scared about. It's like, man, like we're really, really counting on him getting impeached. By the way, we could have touched on, like, you really want Mike Pence? Like, Mike Pence is the guy. All right, I'm gonna link to foreignpolicyfocus.com. foreignpolicyfocus.libsyn.com. I watch your show all the time, Kyle, not just because you're my friend, because you always have good information. I don't know if you like sit down, like when I do my podcast, Kyle, I like usually read off a script, and it sounds like you're just spewing knowledge, man, all the time. So everybody check out Foreign Policy Focus. Also check out Foreign Policy Focus episode number 213. I think you cover Russiagate in detail, and that was relatively old. I don't know if that was like a year ago or, you're going to get some prior details a little bit farther back than
right. Yeah, it doesn't cover everything, but it covered everything up until that point. And I mean, I could probably find an episode that I did on Around the Empire, my friend Joanne's show. I can link to you for some more recent stuff, but the more recent stuff hasn't. I haven't done like a big comprehensive review episode. I've just been kind of sprinkling through all episodes, and I think like Steven does, listening to most of the episodes is the best way to consume Foreign Policy Focus, not just for the show's download numbers and because I like when people listen, because I do update shows as I go on every day. So I don't review Yemen every day, but I may talk about Yemen 2 or 3 times a week just because it's important what's going on there.
And you do even more than that. You write for libertarianinstitute.org. Well, I don't know if you write too much, but you're heavily involved with the site, and you're working with Scott Horton. You're working with Will Porter. Will Porter's our good friend. So we're going to link to Libertarian Institute. We're going to link to Immersion News. We're going to link to about 50 other things on top of your Sherry Voluntary episode coming out with Yemen. I'm sure it's going to be great. There's going to be a ton of links here, guys. Ton of links. I mean, no excuse for you to not grasp this at all. So, thank you so much for coming on, Kyle, and let's do this again soon.
All right. Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, man.